I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. We have with us members from Markmonitor's Global Industry Relations team. Leanne Kenny, a manager on the team who focuses on the EMEA area. Chris Nemi, a manager of strategic initiatives. Prudence Malinky, who heads the Global Industry Relations team. And Heidi Zhang, a member of the Global Industry Relations team and also head of Markmonitor China Registrar. I would like to pass off to Leanne Kenny to take us through today's agenda.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our ICANN recap. As Natalie said, it was a packed meeting, and you can see that from the agenda. The team today are going to give you a high-level overview of some of the things covered on the agenda. We have new gTLD developments, DNS abuse updates, some policy development work to cover in terms of Latin Script Diacritics, privacy and proxy, ccNSO updates from the GAC, review of reviews, and a registration data request service. With that, I'm going to hand over to Prudence to give you a high-level overview of what happened in the meeting.
Oh, thank you so much, Leanne. Hi, everyone. My name is Prudence Malinky. I am the head of Global Industry Relations at Markmonitor, and I want to give you a quick snapshot into all things ICANN 84. For those of you who are eagle-eyed, you'd notice that this ICANN was held in not so sunny, but very welcoming Dublin, as opposed to Oman in Muscat of the original location. We had to change locations at last minute. I just want to take a moment to thank the ICANN staff for doing an exemplary job in doing a very quick pivot to reorganizing a new location, a new event, updating all of the details and making sure that everyone was fed, clothed and watered and hosting a fantastic meeting. Great job, guys. Thank you so much, team. That was really well done. Very quick and very efficient pivot. Great work. Now, as I've mentioned, was in not so sunny Dublin. It actually had more in-person attendees than the previous meeting before it, with 1,566, which is more than I think it was around 1,321 that we had in the Prague meeting before. Now, we actually had less virtual participation, with only 513 participants virtually attending, as opposed to 555 which attended the Prague meeting earlier on in the year. Now, this meeting had a number of themes, and we have so much to cover in today's session. One of the big themes, which we'll talk on the sessions of interest slide that you can see here, is that of, I've got a new initialism for you, RIRs, which are Regional Internet Registries. This was such a hot topic, and the reason being is that we had the privilege to welcome back the RIR AFRINIC after they had a bit of a turbulent time and some infrastructure issues. They were able to rejoin, reconstitute their board and reintegrate back into the ICANN community. So welcome back, AFRINIC, wishing them a safe return and a prosperous future. But what AFRINIC experienced, we saw an actual highlighting an issue with regards to ICP2, which is the governance document relating to RIRs. For the first time in over a decade, our ICP2 is now being reviewed. This is going to be looking into mechanisms for governance and new ways of making sure that we can ensure that if RIRs experience difficulty and issues, then we have processes to help support them, including clearly labeling where and when I can intervene and provide additional layers of support to help ours with their stability and security as well. So congratulations again to the return to AFRINIC. And as you can see from the sessions of interest area, regional internet registries was a hot topic. Also, we had increasing capacity in underserved regions, which was a new topic where we talked with the board community about challenges faced by registries and registrars with gaining accreditation. And the additional sessions that were of interest to do with the meeting was a general theme of movement and change. We noticed new additions to the board. I'd like to take a very quick moment to welcome and say congratulations again to Greg DiBiase of Amazon. Congratulations on taking your board seat. We're very happy and excited to see what's to come for you, Greg. Well done. In addition, we also had movement, development, and change with regards to council, with Susan Payne becoming council chair and Peter Akinremi and Jen Chung as vice chairs. This signifies a new era for leadership at council. So I want to congratulate all of the new leadership in the council. We're going to discuss the ccNSO drama and the board seat race a little bit later on, and my colleague Leanne will tell you all about that. We also have the dates in relation to not just 85, but now 86 and 87. We have ICANN 85 in March in Mumbai, ICANN 86, the policy meeting in June in Seville, Spain. That's going to be a hot meeting. Good luck. And then also the AGM. For those of you who thought you'd escaped the need to go to Muscat, to Oman, ICANN 87, our annual general meeting, will be held in next year. We will eventually have a year of hotness for next year's meetings. Get yourself prepared to forgive people for sweating and maybe being a bit flustered, because it's going to be a season of hot meetings. Meeting locations, I'm getting into the substance of what happened during the sessions. I'm going to hand over to Chris Nemi, who's going to talk to us about all things next round and new GTLDs. Thanks.
Thanks, Prudence, for that warm welcome. And we're excited here to talk today about new GTLDs. And in my world, next round was probably the most action-packed part of the week. The most important thing that happened at the board meeting that ended the meeting, where the ICANN board approved a resolution to adopt the applicant guidebook. So that's exciting. The AGB is the item. It's the set of rules and requirements for the next round. The fact that the board has adopted that, and then that'll now be published in December, officially sort of opens that the next round. For years this has been the thing, everybody's been talking about it, and this is one of the last symbolic acts that will set forth everything in process in December. Kudos to the implementation review team, who spent many months, many years, hundreds of hours of labor to put this together, so well done, guys. Next slide. The other exciting thing that was happening on the ground throughout the week was with regards to the Registry Service Provider Pre-Evaluation Program, or the RSPs. Throughout the week, there was murmurs throughout that the RSP, what's called RST, or Registry System Testing environment, was not working and had not worked for a number of weeks. In a few different sessions, people were asking ICANN about it, receiving terms. But then on Wednesday, it came out with the announcement that you see part of on the screen. It turns out the testing system unfortunately had a technical issue where some information was being seen across different users. ICANN has confirmed that this is no longer happening. They took the system offline. It only happened in the testing environment. Only one limited issuance of personal information happened. So they resolved the situation. They brought in third-party consultants to audit and confirm that everything's up and running, and they will turn it back on November 12th. So this was kind of a big deal. The RSP program is a big part of the next round. Originally, things were supposed to be posted by December 9th of who passed through successfully. ICANN confirmed that date will no longer be met. However, they will produce a list and publish it before the round opens. For those who've been around since the 2012 round, it gave us flashbacks to the task bug that happened then. Hopefully it's been fixed and we won't have any more of these issues going forward, but it does give us a teeny bit of pause. But I think ICANN's got it covered. Next slide. The third issue on the next round front is the next round base RA, or registry agreement. Originally, this was supposed to have 2 public comment periods, but as they've continued to finalize the work, they realized the 3rd public comment period was needed. The RA will have a new specification 14, which talks about internationalized domains, variant top-level domains, including some issues around variant strings, the fees associated, and so forth. ICANN is continuing to work on that. That public comment period is going to open in December. It should be resolved probably in January, and the RA should be finalized by March. So it'll be happening before the opening of the application window in April. Next slide. Some related information, related activities that's currently happening, again, is in the public comment sphere. As I said, that public comment 3 on the base registry agreement is coming soon. The public comment 2 is currently happening, and that's going to end on November 17th. And then in related matters, there is a public comment on the string similarity evaluation part of the process where strings are compared against each other. A lot of information goes into that. So part of this was ICANN and the community compiled a bunch of data that will be utilized in the application process and given to the application panel, the evaluation panel. This comment is around that data that was compiled, and that will then be utilized in combination with the SSE tool that ICANN has developed to execute the SSE once the evaluation happens. Next slide. So as you can see, this was an important issue throughout the week. There were a number of sessions where the IRT met and the ICANN staff joined and answered questions, worked through a number of issues describing all the things from the applicant journey to outreach and so forth. One interesting point that came up through the week was this idea that in the last round, parties who applied could do joint ventures. They could find private ways of settling contention sets. ICANN is no longer allowing that for this round, but applicants will be able to talk to each other up until the reveal day when all the strings in the applications will be shown publicly. So it sounds like there'll be some interesting actors who will jump into that space and probably provide services around matching applicants to see if they can work together before it's verboten by the rules. So if you're interested in anything like that, reach out and let me know and we can talk about it. Next slide. This is just a slide to show that this was front of mind across the whole community. Different SOs and ACs were talking about the next round. Close to my heart, there was a BRG or brand registry group session where we discussed again with ICANN, the applicant journey, as well as the base RA. So this was an activity happening throughout the meeting. As we get closer, it clearly has been a focus of the community. Speaking of the RSP pre-evaluation program, like I already talked about, this slide just shows that even though there was some difficulties around the testing portion, activity is still underway. The RSPs had to apply one of the particular RSP types for the ICANN requirements. So activity is still ongoing there. Next slide. The ASP or Applicant Support Program is a program that ICANN has put on to provide for parties who are accepted into the program. They can receive discounts on application fees. They can receive non-financial assistance in that, in any way that could assist their applications. And view this, especially the GAC, which Heidi might talk about later, as being important, especially in underserved regions. So ICANN actually announced in October that they've extended the application window from November 19th to December 19th, and now they're up to 115 applications. Next slide. ICANN continues to do outreach across the world. So far, there have been 331 different events throughout the year, with primary focus on Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, and the Middle East. Next slide. The next steps are the applicant guidebook, in which we discussed. It will be finalized by December. So that's an exciting piece of information. We'll be able to review those questions to formulating answers for our clients working on applications. And then again, the base registry agreement, that'll be finalized by March. So by that point, everybody will be aware of what the identified agreement is that'll be going forward into the application window that the registry operators will sign. The last leg was developing the final parts of the processes, working on the TLD application management system, gathering all the appropriate labor and other parties who are going to do all the work to process applications and so forth. So with all that, great news. We have a round coming. April is not in danger at this time. We're full speed ahead and looking forward to the round opening soon. With that, I'll pass it to Leanne to discuss.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm going to cover the sessions relating to DNS abuse updates. This is a theme that runs through lots of different communities, but I'm going to start with the GNSO work session. And I thought it would be a good idea to introduce some of you to how the GNSO policy development process works. As you can see from the snake slide, there are a lot of steps in the policy development process, and I'm going to use the example of the recent DNS abuse discussions to illustrate how it moves through the process. Earlier this year, the GNSO reconvened the DNS abuse small team to re-examine research, evidence, and data to identify gaps from a DNS abuse mitigation perspective. They recommended that an issue report should be drafted, and that would be the start of the policy development process. So that initial report was published, and then there was a public comment period for that, which closed just before the meeting in Dublin. This GNSO work session was kind of talking about some of the things that were published in that preliminary report, which focused on 3 priority areas. Next slide, please. The 3 priority topics identified in the report were unrestricted API access for high volume domains, introducing some friction into the registration process that uses APIs, particularly where it might be a new customer for a registrar, because that was one of the areas that was identified through the informal project research that potentially was a mechanism for people to register domains that would go on to be used for DNS abuse. Another priority area was associated domain check. So this is exploring the idea of where a registrar receives a report of a domain being used for DNS abuse, that they would then carry out a proactive check on other domains that may be registered by that registrant. Some registrars seem to already be doing this kind of check. There are concerns from a human rights perspective in terms of whether that would lead to the automatic suspension of domains because one single domain in a portfolio was being used for DNS abuse. And the other priority area was domain generation algorithms, so DGAs. So this is where a program is used to generate a large number of domain registrations within a very short period of time. This is often used by cyber criminals to register huge batches of domains that would then go on to be used in a phishing campaign. So in terms of public comments, there's general support for these 3 areas. The recommendation is to focus on number 1 and number 2 in the first instance by beginning the PDP process or moving on into the next stage of that snake diagram, producing a final issue report that would then go on to have the rest of the policy development work done. On DGAs, this is probably going to require cooperation with registries and registries within the ccTLD space as well, who are not, they don't come under the GNSO consensus policies because they create their own policies as ccTLDs. And just a note on timing, the GAC was keen, particularly after the Prague meeting, to get moving with this policy development process. They would like this to be complete before the launch of new gTLDs. Now, there was some debate over whether that was the launch of the application window or the launch of approved new gTLDs that were going to be delegated. But there's definitely a sense within the community that this is something that should be expedited. And that also came up in discussion in relation to whether the first 2 priority topics could be done in simultaneous PDP processes or at the same time. And there are some concerns around resourcing. So from a community volunteer perspective as to whether that's feasible. So lots more to come on this one. The next stage will be to publish that final report. Next slide, please. DNS abuse is a theme that runs across multiple communities, and it was also discussed in the ccNSO. They have a DNS abuse standing committee. They had a joint tech day and had ccTLDs present on how they were using AI tools to mitigate DNS abuse. We had presentations from .eu, .uk and .us who are using AI tools in a variety of ways. So perhaps to identify registration data, which may look inaccurate, and signpost that a domain could be used in a malicious manner. .uk talked about Domain Watch, where they look for the registration in domains of specific terms, such as HMRC, the government tax department in the UK, or bank, for example. In the US, they have a proof of concept to actually identify in a similar way those high-risk strings, but block those domains from being registered. So lots of work happening in the ccTLD space. And there was a joint GAC and ccNSO session, which is a really good session in terms of information sharing. There was a presentation from the FBI. They spoke about how cryptocurrency investment scams is the #1 crime that's being reported to them at the moment. And there was also information sharing workshops between GAC members and ccNSO members around, again, the use of AI, which is very topical at the moment, investigating abuse in domain portfolios, bulk registration, national frameworks for scam and fraud prevention, and trusted notifier networks. A great example of information sharing and helping the GAC inform their understanding of what's happening within the community to mitigate DNS abuse. And with that, I think I'm passing on to Prudence.
Thanks so much for that update, Leanne. So what I'm hearing is faster PDPs, brilliant PDPs that are so fast that they're happening before the next round. Speaking of efficient PDPs, I'm going to give you an update on your board recommended. To remind those who may not know, and just to jog your memory, the LDPDP is all about Latin Script Diacritics. If you look at this slide, it's to take the ASCII version of a TLD, the normal Latin script version of a TLD, which is the one you see on the left, and then finding out the rules and parameters and exception policies for when you can have both the ASCII string on the left and the diacritic on the right alongside one another, creating the framework in which both of them can coexist at the same time. This is a really exciting PDP because it's determining how these rules will work, when they can work and when they can't work. The fantastic team and the fantastic working group explored the relation of ASCIIs and diacritics at the second level. They had a deep dive during the ICANN 84 meeting, really having a look at what happens at second level where you have a diacritic, when you have a variance, when it works, when it doesn't work, and when the sessions went through smoothly. If we go to the second slide, I want to talk you through one of the fun things that happened in the second session. They had a stress test. As you can see from this slide, they went through working examples posed by various members of the working group and beyond, and they worked through these examples to see if the Latin script would be permitted, whether these rules would apply, whether this policy would apply, whether the IDN EPDP policy would apply, things of that nature. It was really fun if you're into that kind of thing. But it was a really good session, and the team have been working really well together. The work that the team are doing has been recognised at board level during that week in ICANN as being a potential flagship for what a PDP should and could be. When you hear Leanne talking about having PDPs that are efficient, having PDPs that are fast, having PDPs that are effective, this PDP is a shining example of that kind of work, which is fantastic. And there's a distinct lack of drama, distinct lack of popcorn moments in this PDP, which to some may sound boring, but when it comes to showing how PDP could run, it's actually quite interesting. However, the stuff that's happening outside of the PDP is a different matter. Let's go to the next slide. Here you'll see a timeline for which the PDP is due to be delivered and the various different steps of that PDP. Now, this PDP is doing exceptionally well, 2 to 3 months ahead of schedule, which is pretty much unprecedented with regards to efficiency. And this is not just down to Michael Boland and Mark being fantastic leaders, but also the staff team led by the brilliant Seiwan doing an exemplary job of keeping everyone on track, and the working group members working collaboratively to make sure that they achieve what they need to and get the job done, which is fantastic. If you are paying close attention to this timeline, you'll note that the outcomes of the PDP do not coincide with the next round. And there's been a lot of discussion outside of the PDP with regards to making efforts to try and include this work into the next round. This has become so prevalent, or these discussions have become so escalated, that the GAC advice, which was released earlier this week, actually specifically referenced the work of this LDPDP, and the GAC would like to strive to see this work being included somehow into the next round. How? We do not know, but the GAC has mentioned it. Everyone's watching the work, not because it's not going well, but because it's going so well, it should be incorporated. So this is, again, very, very exciting. We're hoping to have the public comment open and available before the winter holidays. And also, as well, again, I like keep saying this is an exemplary PDP and it's so good and everyone's doing really well. But this is one of the first PDPs that actually has a human rights impact assessment. So the working group are currently reviewing a checklist and assessing PDP. They've got another document that they're working through. This is a wonderful example of how PDPs could be. When you see Leanne demonstrating with that snake about how that process flow works with a PDP and how policy should be done, you'll be able to track this specific PDP on the various different stages as well, because again, it's a really great working example as to how we can get stuff done. Okay, but less glowing about all of the work of the LDPDP. I'm going to move on back to Leanne to speak about all things ccNSO.
Thanks, Prudence. ccNSO update. Quick reminder on ccNSO. The members are ccTLDs, predominantly country code, top level domain registries. They make their own policies, often governed by national laws in the area that they're in. So they have some council and board election coming up. I'm going to start with the board seat. So the ccNSO has 2 seats on the ICANN board, board seat 11 and board seat 12. Patricio Pobletti from .cl is currently in board seat 11 and his term ends in October 2026. He has been nominated, seconded and accepted the nomination, and he will stand for election again. He is the only candidate, but interestingly, they will still do an election because ccNSO members can choose to endorse and vote for him, or they can choose not to support, and they can also choose to not support any of the above. Quite interesting that even though he's the only candidate, they will still carry out the election. And then moving on to council seats. The way the ccNSO council is set up is that they have 18 seats. There are 3 seats for every geographic region. There are 5 geographic regions, which you can see on the slide. There are a further 3 seats that are appointed by the nominating committee. At this meeting, we got to meet the candidates standing for election to the council. Next slide, please. Here are the candidates. Africa has not yet put its call out for nominations. That is taking place on the 13th of November. In the APAC region, there are 2 candidates who have been nominated and accepted their nomination. Boyoung from the South Korean registry and Sami, who is from the Bahrain registry. So an interesting Q&A session with both of those candidates, as they are actually in a competition, if you like, for election. And then you can see from the other regions in Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, and also North America, there is 1 candidate who has been put forward and accepted their nomination. So they will be appointed to the council. Next slide, please. One of the interesting sessions that happens within the ccNSO space is the ccTLD news update. This is where ccTLDs present on things happening within their registry, or might be a regulatory update. Lots of work happening in the Nigerian registry, They're working on automation of their registrar systems, and they've also recently had a newly introduced Nigerian Data Protection Act. They have been working on redacting personal data from the WHOIS, and I think the next steps on that is to provide registrars with the ability to also choose which information can be redacted or not. The Norwegian registry provided an overview of how they work with law enforcement agencies within Norway to suspend domains used for illegal activity. Their registration processes help significantly with DNS abuse because you have to be registered on Norwegian Business Register or another database within Norway, so they can validate that you are who you say you are. Colombia updated on their recent transition to a new registry service provider. Denmark provided an update on their changes to their administration model. They have a dual model. So they have a registrant model and a registrar model. As a registrant, you can register a domain with a registrar, and then you can choose to manage that domain directly with the registry for invoicing, renewals. If you want to make changes to the domain, you can actually do that directly. They also have a registrar model where a registrant can register a domain with a registrar and have the registrar manage all their domain transactions. They're seeking to simplify that significantly by removing that registrant model and just going to a registrar model. There's quite a long time frame for this. They expect that to come into place in 2028. There's a lot of transition to be done to that. But it's quite a significant change for a registry to make. Armenia gave an update on how they are thinking about promoting and marketing their ccTLD. So they're thinking about other ways in which .am could be used to signify other words or phrases, for example, aftermarket or artificial intelligence and machine learning. So interesting to see how that marketing come to fruition and whether that increases registration rates in their area. With that, I think I'm passing over to Prudence again.
Thank you so much, Leanne. CCs, one of the reasons why we heavily incorporate the work of ccTLDs into our updates for you guys is sometimes the work of ccTLDs can be like canaries in the coal mine. They can signify changes that are to come down the pipeline, signify disasters that we can try to avert. And the ccTLD world tends to experience things such as regulation or external legislation before the gTLD world does. So we can learn a lot by observing and interacting from both spaces and take preemptive action or pay attention and pay heed. So these updates that you're hearing about what ccTLDs are doing with regards to privacy, data redaction, it's all stuff to pay attention to because it may later happen in the gTLD world. It's time for another initialism. Review of reviews, or RAW as it's called. Okay, no one calls it. I didn't name it review of reviews. I just have to say what it's called. They're calling it the review of reviews. I call it RAW because it sounds more interesting. Let me provide a little bit of context as to what you're looking at here and what this means. This was a very hot topic that was going on during the last ICANN meeting, but it's actually stemmed back from before the meeting in Dublin, and it goes all the way back to ATRT4. After the deferral of the fourth Accountability and Transparency Review Team, or ATRT4, it was kind of determined that a review or the review team's work due to start in April 2024 was falling behind schedule. Earlier this year, a cross-community working group was formulated who then created a charter and the review of reviews was born. Fast forward to now, we have the review of reviews, or RAW, as I like to call it. So basically, as you can see here, what you're looking at is the draft purpose of reviews statement. Essentially, the work of the review of reviews team is to make an assessment relating to whether ICANN is fulfilling its mission commitments. They're going to be looking at 4 specific arenas, such as the execution by ICANN of its commitments in its articles of incorporation, bylaws and strategic plan. Also looking at the results of the supporting organisations, ACs and NCs, and their continuous improvement programs to see whether that's happening and how that relates to each group. And then also doing the difficult task of making determinations as to whether things are, whether the structure and the components are fit for purpose. This isn't an easy task. This is going to be quite a challenge. And then asking the very philosophical question as to whether ongoing reviews in the future are also going to be fit for purpose. So this ROR, or review of reviews, have their work ahead of them. If you go to the next slide, we can start having a look at the 4 phases of work they will be undertaking. Just by looking at this slide alone, this team are working very quickly. You know, like how I was saying a little bit earlier, the theme of this ICANN was movement, change, faster, more efficient. Look at these very ambitious timelines. We've already hit 1. Phase 1 is done. That document I showed you before, the draft purpose of the review statement, was socialized at the last ICANN meeting, and that document essentially, they were trying to gather feedback and they were consulting the community to get their thoughts and feelings as to where they need to go, additional areas of focus, and to see whether they're in the right track, right? So essentially what we'll be looking at is, once the analysis and the development of the proposals happen, there'll be a further discussion during the Mumbai meeting in March next year. However, just so you guys have a context, the draft report ready for discussions for June 2026. So this is fast. This is not slow. This is fast. Something to bear in mind. The final report is hopefully for August, and they'll be sent directly to the board. This team is ambitious, and I'm kind of excited. And again, it's a new initialism. I don't know whether they're going to keep that name. Again, I didn't make the name, but review of reviews to replace or augment or supplement ATRT4, which didn't happen. With regards to timelines of what's happening next, there'll be a webinar later this month. So if you're seeing this, you're like, wow, this is exciting. You can participate, learn more, and ask questions during the webinar. Please engage. This is important work. The registrar stakeholder group has actually created a governance team to really start paying attention to topics like the review of reviews and developments with the regional internet registries, so we can keep abreast of broader and relevant governance issues that impact how we all operate in the ecosystem. Pay attention to this stuff and we'll provide salient updates. If any of the topics you've heard today interest you and you want to know more, you want a deeper dive, reach out to the GIR team or speak to me directly. I'm always available, or anyone in the GIR team. Just email gir@markmonitor.com. You can ask us any questions. We're happy to answer and provide additional context. This is ongoing, so we'll continue to give you updates relating to the work of reviews. Let's go to the next slide, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about an experiment, a trial, a collection of data. RDRS has been called a lot of things in its time. The Registration Data Request Service, it's due to end. During this ICANN meeting, the Standing Committee convened and decided to review the comments, suggestions, and feedback to their findings report that was put out for public comment. Some of these comments and feedback they received from the broader community were things such as, and when I say comments and feedback, I'm talking about specific ways to improve how the RDRS operates and make it more robust or improve it generally. But the types of feedback that they were receiving were things such as the inclusion of ccTLDs, using API for integration and connectivity, and then also, maybe a bit more controversially, the mandatory participation of registrars. So I'm just going to throw that into the ether. You can do with that what you will. But you can see from the slide there were additional things that were kind of thrown up. But I want to talk a little bit more about another document that came out that's related heavily to the RDRS and the work of the RDRS. And that is the Policy Alignment Analysis document. This one doesn't have an initialism or an acronym. This is just the Policy Alignment Analysis document. Basically, this document works to make sure that we can align all of the different current policy work, future policy work, existing policy implementation, and potential new work to create an alignment. We can look at ways to streamline everything and make the IDRS work. It comes up with proposed paths and next suggestions. For those of you interested in what the RDRS and the next iteration looks like, whether it's SAD2 or RDSAD or SAD-DRS, or whatever they decide to call it, have a look at this document. It's actually quite interesting. It pulls in all of the different policy work and then figures out ways to identify gaps, but then also put it all together and make some pretty good suggestions of next steps. But yes, with regards to the RDRS, this was due to actually end at the end of the month, on the 27th of November. However, the board decided to extend it for another 2 years to allow the development of whatever SAD RDRS thing happens. Beautiful way. I guess we will still be with RDRS for the forthcoming couple of years. So the only thing that remains for me to say is RDRS is dead. Long live RDRS. And with that, I want to pass on to Heidi, who's going to talk to us about all things GAC Communiqué.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to attend ICANN 84 in Dublin and hear all the GAC sessions. I would like to share the GAC comments, insights, and opinions towards the important topics and progress. GAC is short for Governmental Advisory Committee. It is not a decision-making body. It's an advisory committee to the ICANN board by providing advice on issues of public policy based on agreed suggestions or comments among all the members. With one chair and 5 vice chair in place, 2 of the vice chairs from Colombia and Egypt will complete their terms, and we will welcome 2 new vice chair from Lebanon and Uganda at the beginning of ICANN 85, while Australia and the Netherlands and Switzerland representatives remain in the vice chair position. So with so many important topics going on, the GAC has come up with 9 strategic objectives that they expect to have outcomes for the next year. So the GAC appreciates all the outcome and progress by different working groups. There have been 6 topics being of the importance to the GAC for long, which are the next round of new gTLD, SOI, namely community statements of interest, ICANN review of reviews, DNS abuse, as always, domain registration data, namely the governance of regional internet registries. For the next round of new gTLD, there have been significant increase in application for ASP since ICANN 83, as Chris just mentioned, but the geographic imbalance still exists. The GAC understand that ICANN and different multiple stakeholders have conducted a lot of outreach across different regions, and the GAC will appreciate a dialogue with ICANN to ensure that the outreach on the next round can help improving the global diversity of the DNS sector and encourage applicants from underserved regions. Next concern. Another matter pointed out by the GAC is the additional cost for geographic names. A geographic name panel will determine whether the applied string represents a geographic name, so there will be additional fee for the review work. And it is estimated to be between 18,000 to 25,000, and the GAC would expect further introduction and clarification to justify the cost. For SOI, the GAC welcomes the adoption by the board of ICANN Community Participant Code of Conduct concerning statements of interest. And for ICANN review of the reviews, the GAC stressed the importance and expect to engage more actively in this effort. DNS abuse has always been an important topic, so Leanne has covered a lot. From the GAC perspective, the GAC confirmed a 2-pronged approach on its work, which are advancing policy progress and developing the capacity of GAC members on this subject. Domain registration data. RDRS is still the hot topic. So the GAC holds the opinion that permanent and centralized mechanism is necessary. And GAC also supports the continuity of RDRS after pilot and expect further improvement. And the GAC, as always, encourage participation by all registrars. There is another thing about data accuracy. There has been work by GNSO's small team on accuracy, and there is the first recommendation that the RA currently provides a 15-day timeline for registrars to validate and verify the contact information. But because malicious actors often start to use new domain names within hours after domain registration, the GAC recommends that registrars be required to complete the validation and verification steps before a newly registered domain name can become accessible. The last is governance of regional internet registries. The GAC would welcome continued dialogue with ICANN and the regional internet registries to maintain trust and confidence in the internet number governance system.
Sure, thanks, Heidi. One of our roles, we take pride in advocating on behalf of our customers, but we encourage them to also participate in the processes if they can. If you're interested in the intellectual property area and want to work in the ICANN community on that, you may want to consider joining the Intellectual Property Constituency or IPC. If you would like to represent the commercial users of the internet, you can take part in the Business Constituency or BC. Or if you're also interested, particularly with the next round coming up of applying for a .brand generic top level domain, you can join the brand registry group. So just reach out and let us know, and we're happy to help you get set up in those areas. Heidi, do you want to remind us where we're going for the next ICANN meeting?
Yeah, so ICANN meeting is coming to APAC next year, March, in India, Mumbai. Welcome to Asia and welcome to India to feel the fast developing economy and technology and the vibe. Welcome to next ICANN with us together. I will give the stage back to Natalie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat or contact any of the folks you see on screen today. We're more than happy to help you. I can talk you through any policy questions you have, so please reach out for anything at all.
Thank you all for joining us on our ICANN Recap webinar. We hope that you found it useful. If you do have any further questions, reach out to any of us here or email gir@markmonitor.com. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we hope to see you in Mumbai. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Goodbye.